Former Blink-182 singer and guitarist Tom Delonge was always a stargazer obsessed with UFOs and aliens, so it's really no surprise that he helped form To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science to help study and research exotic technologies. And what really put the company on the map was when the United States Navy acknowledged that the unidentified objects in certain videos that To the Stars put out were real. But is the Academy truly as independent as they claim to be? Join myself and Neil here on Aliens Explored as we look into To the Stars Academy. And this week's episode is dedicated to our Explorer of the Week, and this week it is D. Nandwani. Now, thank you, D, for helping to support this podcast and help make it a reality. We definitely appreciate you, and I'm sure all the listeners will join me in thanking you for it. If you too want to be a Patreon of this page, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/aliens explored and look into finding a tier that suits you. We've got a wide range of rewards and awards at various levels to suit everyone. So have a look. But in the meantime, thank you, Explorer of the Week, D. Nandwani.
Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions, and other strange events from both a believing and a skeptical perspective, whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it? Hello listeners and welcome back to Aliens Explored, your weekly look at the mysterious skies and the stars beyond and all the kinds of ideas that we develop about it and follow through here on this show. I'm one of your hosts, Neil Kelly.
And I'm your other host, Stu Jackson. How are you doing, Neil?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Stumbling a bit, tripping over my words, but otherwise I'm in perfect shape to do this show. Let me just take a sip of tea as it's 2:00 in the afternoon here in England, and that's what we do.
Yes, everything stops for tea. There was even a song about it. Interesting.
And this week,
one.
sorry, shall I continue the welcome? This week, we're going to be looking at something called the To the Stars Academy. That's our topic for the week.
Yes, and Blink-182. So I'm kind of hoping we might reach out to Blink-182 fans a little bit.
Yes, it was co-founded by Tom Delonge, guitarist of Blink-182 and Angels and Airwaves.
Yes.
That was another founder. He was one of the founders, along with Harold E. Puthoff and Jim Semivan.
He sort of was.
Yes, so it was founded in 2017 as a public benefit corporation, according to Wikipedia by Jim Semivan, who was a former senior intelligence officer at the CIA.
I'm going to stop you right there and say, actually, it goes back to 2014, when To the Stars was a record label.
Which debuted with the Angels and Airwaves' fifth studio album, and then it became To the Stars Academy in 2017, when the CIA apparently got involved.
Basically. It was basically bought as an ongoing concern to the Stars record label.
Yeah, and that's where kind of Tom DeLonge's interest comes in. So Angels and Airwaves, I think it's pretty much his solo work, his solo band work, which is why, I'm going to be honest, I'd never heard of them. But I heard of Blink-182.
I'd heard of them, but I'm not very familiar with their work. I guess it's not my kind of rock.
No, ditto. I'm sure I must have heard Blink-182 songs at some point, but yeah, I couldn't name one, I'm afraid.
Would you, without being a particular fan, where would you have heard it?
Oh, Radio 2.
Oh, do they? Do they play it on Radio 2?
I'm assuming so, when they've been in the charts and stuff.
Okay.
Radio 2, for our American listeners, is a BBC radio station where they... Radio 1 is for like your top hits, your latest sort of pop music. Radio
it's
2
for teenagers.
All encompassing. Yeah.
More,
at least that's what
sort
it used to be.
Middle of the road kind of tastes, MOR. Whereas the Radio 1 is for teenagers.
Yes. Well,
and tries desperately to be hip and in tune with what these young people are listening to these days, or actually probably trying to decide what they're going to be listening to. That's the way the pop music industry tends to work now. Yes,
absolutely. So I used to listen to radio back in the days before Spotify. I used to listen to Radio 2 when I was in the car, and I'm sure because that was back in the day. So I'm sure I must have heard Blink-182 at some point. There we go. Do let us know, listeners, what your favourite Blink-182 album and or track is, and we'll give that a listen. Absolutely.
Or perhaps Tom DeLonge's first solo album, which is called To the Stars, Demos, Odds and Ends.
There we go. And he set up the record label To the Stars as well, like you rightly say, basically for Angels and What's It's to launch their own stuff, I suppose. But yes, To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences was formed in 2017 when To the Stars was bought out. So it's a weird company. I think this is a really weird company, a weird arrangement of companies.
Well, financially, they don't seem to have done very well. I mean, they started offering $50 million worth of public stock, and then a month later, only 1 million of those shares have been sold, and they had a 37.4 million deficit. That doesn't quite add up in my maths, but I guess that stock will become worth more or something, but I don't know.
Well, if it costs 38 million to run, you can still offer 50 million pounds worth of stock, or shares, basically.
Yeah.
But I think it was done through crowdfunding anyway. I'm not entirely
okay.
Sure. I'm not a finance person, so as my bank account testifies. But yeah, it's got these different branches to the company. There's entertainment, science and aerospace. Like, well, what? It doesn't gel as a company. It's like my brand, Stu Jackson, the brand, the company, the self-employed organisation, if you like. Yes, I'm an actor, I'm a voiceover artist, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a producer, I'm an editor. All these things go together. They kind of like sit in the same. But entertainment and science and aerospace, that's like, I don't know.
That is an odd mix, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like a company like Amazon suddenly becoming competition for NASA. Oh wait, hang on.
But there's also I think there's a clash there, because if they began releasing books and graphic novels, children's picture books, mostly dealing with topics of the supernatural, ufology, and science fiction, yet at the same time they have a science and aerospace division devoted to the outer edges of science, such as investigating UFOs, Yeah, I can see how their fictional side will bleed into their supposedly objectively scientific side. How can you trust an organisation's scientific findings when you know that organisation also peddles science fiction?
I suppose so. So to play devil's advocate a little bit here, do you know what? I can sort of see a reasoning behind that in terms of education and the way education is done. So, for example, here in the UK, we had a comedy science fiction show. I'm sure most of our listeners will have heard of it, called Red Dwarf. You'll remember Red Dwarf, of course, Neil.
I remember Red Dwarf. Yes.
So there was, like, for example, and I'm pulling this out of thin air, but for example, there was an episode when the Red Dwarf crew went back in time and tried to save JFK from getting shot. Now, I'm sure, I'm absolutely confident that there are lots of people who are sci-fi fans, who are comedy fans, who will have watched that episode and learnt things about the JFK incident that they didn't know previously. So in that sense, it was informative as well as entertaining.
But a lot of fiction isn't it? I mean, a lot of people know their history through reading historical fiction. If you want to know a lot about Tudor times, I can highly recommend C.J. Sansom's mystery novel set during the Tudor or during the Henry VIII era. Yeah, there's an awful lot of detail there, and it's we are storytelling creatures, and for many of us, reading a novel which is based around a true historical background is the easiest way of absorbing these historical facts, rather than just reading a very dry historical account and trying to remember dates and places.
So there you go. You've just answered your own question then.
No, I think this is different. This is a company that produces scientific research and science fiction, and I can see how one, you're making claims. Reading a C.J. Sampson book, he's not making controversial claims about Henry VIII or the Tudor era. He's just telling a story against fairly commonly accepted backdrop, fairly uncontroversial. When you're mixing science and science fiction, where does one start and where does the other end? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I can definitely see how lines might get blurred. But I can also see in terms of sort of education of the general population. Anyway, that's...
Actually, I think a good comparison will be, I know you're a Trekkie fan, and I have seen, although I haven't studied in depth, books of the science behind Star Trek. Science behind their propulsion systems, their transportation chamber. And I imagine there are big chunks of that diagram that just say a big bunch of who knows what. This is 5 centuries in the future. We don't know what's in there. Some sort of magic is in there.
Well, now you say that. Oh dear, you've gone right into my wheelhouse.
I'm going to hit you where you live, mate.
So the science of Star Trek is actually based on real life science. Much of it theoretical, but the writers of Star Trek and the producers, they keep themselves up to date with the very latest developments in science and technology. There is, for example, they talk about antimatter and matter colliding to create the power involved in propelling a starship faster than light. Well, that was back when antimatter was only theoretical. Well, now it's been proved. And yes, antimatter and matter coming together would produce a massive amount of power. It would obviously be controlling that power and what have you.
But they're still at they're at the cutting edge of science albeit at the cutting edge of scientific theory in the 21st century. And Star Trek set, when is it, the 23rd century or beyond?
23rd and 24th centuries, yeah,
23rd,
absolutely.
24th century, so 200 or 300 years in the future. I mean, it's often been said that the best way to get a prediction about what might happen in the future is through science fiction rather than science fact. Because if you stick to science fact, you're constrained by what is known or what is understood now, and which doesn't allow for some kind of quantum leap, what do they call it, a paradigm shift in 50 years' time when something is understood in a completely different way. And one of the best examples I heard about this was our American listeners will probably be very familiar with a cartoon character called Dick Tracy, a comic strip detective who appeared, I think, in newspapers and in his own comic books, I think from about the 1940s, possibly earlier. But in the 1940s, Dick Tracy had a device. He had a wrist radio. It was like a wristwatch, a big wristwatch with an aerial that would stick out of it. And in the cartoon, it would go calling Dick Tracy, and he would respond to his radio, which was on his wrist. Well, in those days, a radio was a big thing. You couldn't carry around a radio. Radios, I don't think they even had them in cars in the 1940s. Did they have radio cars? No, I think they had radio cars in the 40s. But basically what people were saying was, it's impossible to have a radio that small because where would all the valves go? A valve is this big for one. You need several of them, because they were just basing it on what they understood scientifically as at the time of how a radio. It's basically it's a piece of furniture, and somehow you've reduced it to something that fits on your wrist. Of course, we know now that's we've had transistors since then and microchips, so we know very well that you can easily have you could have a radio so small you can put it in your eye, But back then, but the people who wrote Dick Tracy, their response to that was just to say, we don't care. We just know that we just decided that this is possible. We're not going to go into the actual science as it's understood today of how this might work. We just decided that this is something that he's got, and you can wonder about it all you like.
Well, I'm going to bring that straight back round to Star Trek again. Because back in the 60s, of course, when you had the original series, you had things like lasers that fit in your hand. Well, a laser would be room-sized back then. You had, and my favourite one is the communicator, a wireless communication device that fitted in your hand and flipped open. Well, fast forward to, I think it was the early 90s, back when mobile phones were first becoming a thing, like proper mobile phones. I'm not talking about the car phone type that literally had a car battery attached to it, and that's what you would carry around like a suitcase. I had one of those. But no, back when the first proper mobile phones came out, Motorola released one that was a flip phone, like a clamshell type flip phone, called the StarTAC. And the reason it was called that is they wanted to call it the Star Trek, but they couldn't get the licensing. So they called it a StarTAC. There you go. Anyway, we've gotten quite off topic here. So background to, yes, let's talk then about the science and aerospace arm of To the Stars Academy. And you're absolutely right. They research or they claim to research fringe technologies and UFOs. And there's certainly in ufology, they are very divisive amongst the people as to whether or not they're actually doing anything to help or not. But I will say, thanks to what they've called the Vault, which is the Virtual Analytics UAP learning tool,
which we did a session on before, didn't we?
No, that's the Black Vault. That's a different.
Right, okay. So this is a different Vault. It's not the Black Vault. This is the Vault.
Different Vault completely. So this is basically a database of UFO. Black Vault was John Greenwald Jr., and he does a lot of freedom of information request stuff.
Okay.
That's it's a separate thing. This is basically just the biggest UFO database that you can find.
In fact, the 3 videos about that went public in 2019, the USS Nimitz UFO incident and the USS Theodore Roosevelt UFO incident, they were confirmed by the US Navy in September 2019 as authentic videos taken by Navy pilots. They were in the vault.
They were released by to the Stars Academy back in 2017, yes. And yes, it was 2019 when they confirmed them. And that's led us quite a long way down the route of disclosure. I mean, people always talk about like disclosure with UFOs happening as a real binary thing. And of course it wouldn't be. It would never be binary. It's going to be step by step, inch by inch, little by little. We're going to get more and more and more. We've actually come already. I mean, when you look back to where we were 10 years ago in terms of governments denying the existence of UFOs, we've come a long way down the disclosure route. A real long way. It's happening. Do you think
really? Because I mean, UFOs and ETs, they're still, I think, regarded as part of the supernatural. You would study them along with other paranormal phenomena.
Yeah,
the 2 kind of go hand in hand. The history of science throughout the history of mankind has been taking stuff which was thought to be supernatural and showing how it's actually natural, finding an explanation for it that's usually quite mundane and terrestrial. Prosaic, is that the right word to use?
It could be. Yeah, I absolutely. Well, you're saying mundane. I would say I would agree with the natural part. I would say,
but as I've said before, we are storytelling creatures. We understand the world through our stories, and when we find something that doesn't fit, something that we can't explain, we try and come up with some sort of explanation. And in the past, and people will see when they see something that they just really don't get, that's really out of their world. Quite often, no 2 people will see the same thing. If they have different cultural backgrounds, they'll see, what they see will be shaped by their pre-existing knowledge and beliefs. And that's where you get things like fairies and hobgoblins. And in the modern era, of course, people aren't going to see a fairy or a hobgoblin. They're going to see an extraterrestrial or a UFO. And I think that's, we're trying to make this stuff fit. And eventually someone will say, oh, no, well, it's just caused by this natural phenomenon. Quartz in the ground, buried deep in the ground, being compressed, causes lights in the sky, which is why you see lights in the sky before a major earthquake.
It is, and sometimes those explanations will be terrestrial. Sometimes they will be extraterrestrial, but it's the difference between theory and fact for me. We theorize the whole concept of there being life on other planets is we don't. It's still theory, but when you look at the Drake's equation and things like that, the idea of it not existing is way more far-fetched than the idea of it existing. Now, I'm not necessarily talking intelligent life or life that is visiting us. I'm talking life in general.
I know that there are billions of galaxies. Is that right in saying, which will contain billions of solar systems, which contain billions of planets? It's a fair chance that some of that contains some form of life. And maybe some of that life has become more technologically advanced than us. That there are beings that can travel between planets. They can travel between dimensions. Maybe there are people who, unlike us, confined to one planet. They've got several planets in their solar system that they've managed to make habitable.
Yeah,
maybe they can even.
We're not that far away from doing that ourselves, What
I have trouble believing is that there are secret government departments who know about all this and are keeping it from us, or they're preparing us to. That's the bit I have trouble with. Having worked in government myself and a secret area of government, I mean, I think anyone who's worked in the civil service or military intelligence or anything like that would have had the experience of having to jump through all sorts of hoops. You're told there's a document that you need to be made aware of, and you have to jump through all sorts of hoops. You have to go through the security. You have to show a special pass to get into this compound, to get into this building, to get into this section of the building, to travel up to a certain floor, all the time going past guards, showing your ID, signing for things. And eventually you go into this vault where you sign this document, sign your life away, basically, and you're presented with this document, and you read it with a security officer breathing down your neck. You're not allowed to take any notes. You're not allowed to record anything. And you read it and you think, well, but I know all this. I read this in the newspaper last week.
Yeah.
And the security officer will say, well, yes, but probably the general public won't have made the connection between this, and point to two things that are really obviously connected. And what are we worried about the general public? No, in my case, we're worried about a KGB officer who probably would make that connection straight away and has a lot of background knowledge. And then they tell you, well, now that you've read this in a top secret document, you're not allowed to discuss it. But it was in the newspaper yesterday. No, sorry, you can't talk about it. You've got special knowledge. I haven't learned anything new from this stuff. Yeah, obviously I was a corporal and I'd be talking to a captain or a major, and I'd be a bit more circumspect in my protestations. I'd just say, you'd say, you're not allowed to discuss this with anyone, and I'd say, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And you have to report anyone you hear talking about it. Yes, sir. Okay. But bye.
You think it in your head.
Yeah.
Well,
it's hard to believe that secret government is really very secret. I mean, I know that there are areas of government of which our political leaders are unaware. Mm-hmm. But I can also imagine, but that's, I think, largely because you have a government department that deals in something that's highly sensitive, highly classified, highly complex. And they would say, well, the Prime Minister isn't dealing with anything related to this at the moment. They're basically trying to pull their party together and try and balance the budget, whatever. They haven't got the bandwidth to take this on board. Someone like Boris Johnson hasn't got the attention span. Liz Truss hasn't got the intelligence. If you impart any of this to Boris Johnson, whatever he gets of it, what's he going to do with that information? The most likely thing he was ever going to do with it will be to blurt it out to some Russian party donor with close ties to Vladimir Putin. Yeah. What else are you going to... That's why we don't tell them stuff unless they actually need to know it. To me, that's what secret government means.
I'm absolutely confident that that's an element of it as well, though. But that's again, that's getting a little bit away from our topic today.
Yeah, do you think? I mean, To the Stars Academy, according to Wikipedia, they're researching UFOs and other fringe science projects. That many of the technologies or phenomena are based on highly speculative theories that almost that toe the line of pseudoscience, and that they've had to detail the risks involved with this research to potential investors, including the possibility that this isn't going to come to anything. We might look into beamed energy propulsion. Yeah, you'll be really rich if we get it to work, but it's quite likely that we won't. Do you think that's why they had trouble selling their shares?
Sounds like a reasonable thing for any speculative technology company to say, in my book. But again, so you drew the line about science fiction earlier, and again, that whole Star Trek thing. Yeah, they talked about like wireless handheld communication devices that could like communicate hundreds of miles. Well, we've got that now. Doors that open automatically when you walk up to them. Didn't exist, of course, when Star Trek came out. Well, now that's a common old, you go to your supermarket and you've got that. It's, and we've had that for a very long time now as well. All this was pure speculative stuff. Now, whether you take your speculation from science fiction or from UFO reports, it kind of doesn't matter. The inspiration, they're saying that we are using this as our inspiration for looking into what the next big technological advance might be.
But isn't it more?
Isn't that fine?
Sorry,
isn't that okay to do?
But speculative technologies, haven't they typically been the preserve of governments with massive checkbooks? Even if it's carried out by private companies, they're government funded. Particularly, I'm thinking of the Cold War, where each side would be looking to all sorts of obscure technologies and possibilities with a view to getting an advantage over the rival, and money was no object. But when you're asking shareholders to invest their own private funds, other people's private funds, in this technology that may very well come to nothing, I think that's a much harder sell.
Well,
is that why they've had such trouble, that they've tried to do it through the private sector completely?
I mean, I honestly think that To the Stars Academy has a lot of government inroads anyway, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're being bankrolled by the government. But to also say, and let's have a public side to this as well. I mean, let's not forget the To the Stars Academy's COO is guy Steve Justice, who is a former head of advanced systems at Skunkworks, Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, that's Lockheed Martin, yeah.
Yeah, well, they have huge government contracts. In fact, Skunkworks and UFOs are something that kind of go hand in hand together and have quite a history together in of itself. He's the COO of
Chief Operating Officer.
Yes. So I wouldn't be surprised if they are being bankrolled by the US government on the quiet as a black ops, not black ops. What do they call it? Black budget.
A slush fund.
Well,
I can't see how they cannot be, if you're going to spend millions looking into something like telepathy. Who is going to invest in that? Yeah, you'll get really rich. It's like buying a lottery ticket, isn't it? The chances of you of succeeding are very, very small, 14 million to 1 or something. But if you do succeed, you'll never have to work again. You'll be rich beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
But, you're not prepared to...
struck by lightning, by the way.
I thought it was actually longer odds, but whatever.
No, hang on. That was back when the lottery came out. It was 16 million to 1. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think, well, okay, if I invest this amount of money, possibly it could pay off and I'd never have to work again. Because I think that's what it was, kind of a misery tax, wasn't it? Or a desperation tax. Buy a ticket and you might not have to go to work on Monday morning ever again.
Yeah.
But people are prepared to invest on that basis, but not very much. They're not prepared to go without. They're not prepared to say, okay, instead of having a holiday this year, let's buy lottery tickets and, it could pay off. Because the odds are it probably won't.
No, that's it. That's it. There's one last thing I want us to talk about with To the Stars Academy, because I find this really intriguing, is what they call, and they do like their acronyms, the ADAM Research Project. This is the Acquisition and Data Analysis of Materials. Now, under this research project, they claim they have what is generally called in ufology circles exotic materials. Now, basically, they claim to have metal that has come from a crashed UFO. They bought it from it was Linda Moulton Howe, who's quite a mover and shaker in the ufology world. They claim that this material, or I think Linda Moulton Howe claimed that when it was electromagnetically charged, this metal becomes basically lighter than air, that it floats. They haven't been able to make it work. studying it, they say, to obviously, look into its practical applications and ways of doing it. But that's quite a big claim. We've got this material. We don't know what it is. We don't know where it came from. Ultimately, kind of originally, they claim it is exotic materials. It's stuff that doesn't exist here on Earth. That's a huge claim.
Although critics have said there's no evidence to support the claim that the materials are otherworldly in origin or scientifically important.
Critics are going to say that, aren't they? That's what critics do.
The Alien Alloys, the American Chemical Society expert panel member Richard Sackleben considers such claims quite impossible. I don't think it's plausible that there's any alloys that we can't identify. If we had such mysterious metals, you could take it to any university where research is done and they could tell you what the elements and something about the crystalline phase within a few hours.
Unless it was an unknown element.
Unless it's an unknown element that's come from, God knows where. No. Maybe,
I'm going to throw out element 115 here. Which was a substance claimed by Bob. Oh my! My brain suddenly stopped working.
Bob
Lazar.
Bob Lazar.
Yeah. Yes, it was a substance claimed by Bob Lazar to have been used in the UFO that he examined and tried reverse engineering. That was before element 115 was discovered, when it didn't exist. And your critics would say, well, that's ridiculous, because if there was an element 115, we'd know about it, and we don't. And then some years later, element 115 is discovered to actually exist. So, yeah, I take things like that from people who haven't actually looked at these materials, who haven't examined them themselves, and are just speculating, oh, well, no, we'd know about it if it existed. No, not necessarily.
But isn't that, again, the same trajectory of magic and supernatural and whatever becoming scientifically explained as we find out more about the natural world? That, there are elements that a few years ago we didn't know about, now we do know about them, and things that we might have thought were magical. I mean, the definition of magic is technology you don't understand, isn't it? And that's the supernatural.
Arthur C. Clarke quote. Yeah, absolutely.
Is it Arthur C. Clarke? Yeah. It's a good quote.
It is.
It pretty much does explain, once you've worked how it works, once you've peeped behind the magician's curtain, there you have it. You know what it is and how it works and where to get it from.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely 100% on board with that one day I am convinced, when we're talking about extraterrestrial craft and extraterrestrial beings, that we will be talking about scientific fact rather than it being put into the nature, like, paranormal box. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And then that's why in my headcanon, it's already there. Not as fact perhaps, but as scientific theory.
Or possibly the other way, we will find a more mundane explanation for those lights in the sky and those seeming UFOs. That, oh, right, it's caused by this combination of weather phenomena and phase of the moon and whatever.
And pollution. Certainly possible. It's certainly possible. And do you know what? It'd just be good to have answers. But what do you think, listeners? Is it all mumbo-jumbo, paranormal, made-up nonsense that will debunk one day? Or is there a grain of truth to it that will become scientific fact in the not-too-distant future?
Are you prepared to invest your college fund in a course of learning at the To the Stars Academy?
Yeah, if you
Money
are
where your mouth
prepared.
is, Ty.
Or if you've done the course, do let us know. Do you know what? We love hearing from people, and you can let us know via the usual means. You can contact us through Facebook, through Twitter, by searching Aliens Explored. We've got our own dedicated YouTube channel now, Aliens Explored, so you can go there. You can you can listen to the podcast there, and you can drop messages about each episode on there. We've been having some really good engagement on there since we launched that. So you can join in with that. Or if you are one of our Patreon members, then you get exclusive access to our Discord server where you can chat with us. You can chat with like-minded people about this or any other UFO topic that comes about. In fact, they've been talking about the Archers recently, of all things. So there we go. Some interesting conversations that come up. But however you do it, do let us know what you think. Oh, an email. I haven't mentioned email. aliensexplored@gmail.com.
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us. Yes, do contact us. Join us next time, though, when we will be talking about an incident from just over 40 years
40
ago.
years ago, yeah.
40 years ago, oh my God. Yeah, 1980, it still feels like 10 years ago to me. We will be talking about Granger Taylor from Canada and his homemade flying saucer. So
I look forward to taking that one apart.
In the meantime, keep watching those shadowy government bodies, their public companies that might be working with them, and indeed
and follow the money.
Researchers as well. Always follow the money. Absolutely. And of course, watching the skies. Take care for now.
Catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.